Okay, welcome everyone again. We are about to start our second session, our second table that is going to be shared by Professor Mike Scott, and we have again distinguished panelists. So Mike, please, the floor is yours.
Right, thanks, Francisco. Okay, this is the second session on agility. Just to set the scene a little bit, I have this analogy in mind about, and I think of the whole post-quantum thing and what we're trying to achieve here. I have this analogy in mind of this asteroid called quantum computing, right? And then we have planet crypto over here, and the asteroid is heading inexorably towards planet crypto. And we know it's going to do a lot of damage when it hits. We know it's going to wipe out a lot of the crypto life. And we're in a position where we need to do something about it, right? We need to be agile. We're not just going to sit there and be mesmerized and say, oh my God, we're going to actually adapt. And that's what we need to do. It's also, I think, important to emphasize the seriousness of the issue, right? Cryptography is actually very important. If, for example, the security of TLS were to be wiped out overnight, the impact on the global economy is really quite terrifying. I think it would dwarf anything we've seen recently. So there's a big responsibility resting on all of our shoulders that we sort this, that we fix this, that we adapt, and we adapt cleverly, agilely, cleverly, and we get things back to a nice, stable, secure state that we can all be confident in. One thing before I want to start the session, I want to say is that we very much encourage questions from the audience and indeed from people who are attending online, right? And there's a lot of potentially fraught, controversial issues around this subject. And I mean, it'd be great to have a voice put to them. I'm going to ask some questions, but there's obviously some questions I mightn't have thought of that might be great questions, and maybe you guys have. So by all means, if you have a question, either here in the room or online, we'll open it up when we get around about the halfway stage. Okay, now, next thing is to introduce the panel. We have Brian LaMantia from Microsoft. We have Raphael who works for Google. And then remotely, we have Edelin Teske, who works for Cryptomatic in Germany, I believe. And then finally, Michael Osborne from IBM, and he's attending from Zurich. Hello, Michael. Hello, Edelin. So initially, like the last session, I ask you all just take a minute each to introduce yourselves. I mean, I could attempt to introduce you, but I probably wouldn't do you justice. So I'll let you do the introductions yourself. So perhaps start with yourself, Brian.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian LaMantia. I'm a distinguished engineer at Microsoft, and I lead the security and cryptography team at Microsoft Research in Redmond. We were co-submitters on 4 proposals to the NIST post-quantum, including QTesla, Frodo, Picnic, and Psych. It's been an interesting last few weeks for us with Psych. I also happen to be treasurer of the IACR. That's not a hat I'm wearing at this event, but when you catch me tomorrow and afterwards, you can also hit me up about that stuff too.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Raphael Mishotsky. I'm a cryptographer at Google. I'm working on the PQC transition for the company. I'm involved in 2 submissions that are now running in the 4th round of the NIST PQC competition, Bike and Classic Mechalis. I'm also involved in some standardization process with ISO, which is the document 1488-4 on stateful hash-based signatures. And I've been working on the PQC field since 2009. So it's very nice to see finally it's prime time and to see all this interest. Thank you.
Edelin?
Yes, I'm Edelin Teske. I'm now with Cryptomatic working from the German office. I am there a senior crypto expert supporting Cryptomatic in helping our customers becoming crypto agile and fend off other threats. I have a background in research on the mathematics of public key cryptography from my 15 plus years at Waterloo. So this topic is still very much at my heart.
Thank you. And Michael?
Hi, everybody. Sorry that I can't be there in person. My name is Mike Osborne. I work for IBM Research as a principal research member. Here I'm responsible for the foundational team, where I really am very privileged to work with the likes of Luca and Vadim and Gregor, involved in a number of schemes. I'm also responsible for implementation of algorithms and deploying these across various IBM platforms. So this includes hardware security module work, and you may have seen the recent quantum safe mainframe announcement. And more recently, I've just become CTO of a new organization that we formed called Quantum Safe. This is co-located with our quantum efforts. And this is the part which is really focused on the migration of and services to help clients migrate or start their quantum safe journey.
Great, thanks, Michael. Yeah, a big issue I think for this roundtable will be for get you guys to talk about migration strategies and exactly in fine detail exactly what your intentions are and what your plans are, because obviously that's a key issue. Okay, let me get back. First of all, I think we need a good definition of crypto agility, and I have one here from. I have two definitions I managed to find from our contributors here. First one is from Edlin. I think I'm quoting you correctly. Crypto agility or cryptographic agility is the capacity for an information security system to adopt an alternative to the original encryption method or cryptographic primitive without significant change to system infrastructure. And I think that's a pretty good definition. I have another definition. I think it comes from you, Brian. Crypto agility, the ability to turn something off, which is short, pithy, and I think quite good as well. So, let me get back first to Edlin. You guys have something called the Cryptomatic Crypto Service Gateway, which is designed to provide the crypto agility that we need. Perhaps you could give us a brief description of that.
Sure. First off, saying that crypto agility, this is not new as a requirement. So that's why we have the crypto service gateway already in place and in our offering, because cryptographic algorithms will have been replaced over time in the past as well. So the crypto service gateway allows that one has an abstraction layer between the application code and the underlying HSM that actually, between the calling application and the underlying HSM, there is an abstraction layer in between. And that's the crypto service gateway, where we have a security policy that is telling the underlying HSM what exactly to do and what application, what code to use, so that the calling application can be completely oblivious of the actual cryptography that is being used in the HSM. So this is what CSG is doing. Right.
It's great to see that you're already in a position to respond in that way. Perhaps next to you, Raphael, if I could ask you, you recently co-authored a paper, Transitioning Organization to Post-Quantum Cryptography, published in Nature in May of this year. Perhaps you could give us a brief rundown as to, I mean, the paper, I couldn't actually access it online, unfortunately, but perhaps you give us a quick rundown of the highlights.
Yes, so basically this is a paper that reviewed the literature on what are the promising strategies to migrate to PQC. We discussed, for example, hybrid approach, why seems to be a very important strategy to migrate to PQC without losing the classical security. We also talk, or let's say maybe speculate about the quantum computing development timeframe and why it's important for the organizations to start working on this transition now. It's really a collection of good practice and the consensus in the community about what can be done now and what needs to be done in the near future. So for example, maybe if I can mention one thing we highlight in the paper is the task of creating a crypto inventory for companies, which is basically finding where you're using classical cryptography, which is a non-trivial problem for large organizations. As you can think, like Google, Microsoft, it's really hard to see where we are using cryptography in a holistic point of view. So it's really a collection of good practices. I really encourage you to have a look. To be honest, I don't really expect to, it's not really anything new, but I think it's a solid review of the good practices that are currently available.
Thanks, Raphael. Michael, there with IBM, I think I'm quoting you correctly, when you said you described cryptographic strategies around agility in most industries as being a mess, right? In fact, I think a couple of people used the word that this is all a bit of a mess, right? Perhaps you could comment on that, and perhaps on IBM strategy.
Sure. I mean, I happen to have been around the migration of RSA to elliptic curve cryptography, so I had quite a lot of insight into kind of what works well and what doesn't work well then. But if you actually look, that there are so many enterprises that still use MD5, still use SHA-1, still use DES for many, many reasons. So I think it's a little bit idealistic to think that we're going to migrate all of our legacy applications this time when we haven't been able to do it in the past. So what does that actually mean? I think it's you can look at things like agility and strategy and standards as a kind of a Y2K type problem, but I think it would be a tragedy if, for example, things became quantum safe at the cost of other very important security strategies, such as zero trust, such as secure software supply chain. So for us, it's very much about looking where the security puck is going, to quote Wayne Gretzky, and really focus on, let's say, making sure that where we're headed is quantum safe, not necessarily where we've come from. Because at the end of the day, if we just end up making things quantum safe, there's so many other security problems that are probably far worse. We'd have wasted a great opportunity. So it's really about, you know, making sure that all of these big security plays are the vehicle for introducing quantum safety.
Right. No, might be a good time now to perhaps get your opinions on the recent NIST competition and its outcome. And since I have you there, Michael, I think perhaps IBM are to be congratulated on having, if you like, backed the winners. As IBM, you were very much involved with the schemes that eventually were standardized. So what made you go take that direction? Can you explain your success?
Well, just with lattice-based cryptography, that we have a very long history going back to fully homomorphic encryption, you know, over a decade ago. So there was a generally very, let's say, very comfortable around a lot of research in these areas. I mean, to be fair, we are also very interested in Psyche. So with Luca, who you've just seen, so we have looked at a number of schemes. We do invest in a number of schemes because we're also very cognizant that whereas lattice is about the nearest you have to a drop-in replacement, it's not going to be a drop-in replacement for everything. Some things are going to need smaller keys or smaller certificates. So in the end, to have the right portfolio of let's say research in cryptography is very important to us.
Yeah, I mean, I heard a rumor, and I know I shouldn't spread rumors. I don't necessarily believe rumors, but I did hear a rumor that IBM were actually rolling out products with lattice-based crypto in it prior to the NIST announcement. I don't know if you care to comment.
That's right. Actually, since a number of iterations, I mean, I think one thing about agility is if you serialize all of the steps to actually get to production crypto, that takes a lot longer than parallelizing certain steps. So it was very important to us to release pre-candidate versions, so round 2 and round 3 versions of our algorithms, purely to get experience as to you know, being able to migrate between different versions of an algorithm, because I'm sure that'll be an issue going forward, as well as really to understand what it takes to migrate some of our platforms. So it was a very conscious decision together with the faith in what we were doing to actually make these available into products. So I mentioned briefly the Z16 announcement. So these algorithms are already optimized and baked into the hardware security module and the stacks of software built on top of that. So for us, it's already an algorithm that we have committed to, you know, as regardless of the NIST outcome, I would say. So, but obviously, very, very happy that that our faith was also shared by others in that respect.
Yeah, so you backed your own hunch, and I guess that's to be commended. Edlin, Perhaps you're a good person maybe to just, I mean, we're going to talk about psych a bit, obviously. I know back in the day you were involved with isogeny-based crypto, one of the earlier researchers. Just have you any view on what just happened?
It's an exciting development for someone like me who has no personal interest in psych, to see that high level, really good, smart mathematics is being applied yet again to analyze cryptography. In that sense, I would see the fall of psych as speaking as a mathematician, as a breakthrough, that suddenly something new, totally unexpected, is able to completely crack a system, as it seems now. And this is a good reminder, if you look at the current system, that these unexpected things can fail. So far in public key crypto, what we have seen with RSA and ECC is that we had incremental improvements over the past 15 to 20 years. Nothing really dramatic happened. And then this was not expected, for me at least, for psych, to see something this dramatic.
Can I ask you, I mean, just as the significance of it, do you regard it as just a knockdown punch for isogenies? I mean, that isogenies will pick themselves up, dust themselves down and get going again? Or is this a stake through the heart type of thing? I've been watching too many vampire movies, but
I wouldn't view it as a stake through the heart. Just as was mentioned in the previous roundtable, that certain classes of elliptic curves got completely taken down, and we still are using elliptic curve cryptography with confidence.
okay, thank you. Next question is, I think I'll go with to Raphael. Let me put this to you. That there's three types of crypto that we need to cover off. One is chems, signatures, and then what I call the other nice stuff. Right now, lattices. I think one of the reasons lattices maybe one is that they hit all three, right? Whereas your involvement is primarily with code-based crypto. I mean, first of all, I know you had a very strong candidate in the competition, and that your own involvement is in code-based crypto. But do you think code-based crypto has a future?
Yes. So I think, as actually Dustin mentioned in the previous panel, I think we need diversity. I think the selected scheme for CAM now, Kyber, is a very good candidate, but I think it will be very risky to put all the eggs in the same basket and rely only on lattice for CAMs. So code-based cryptography, I think, even as mentioned in the report, in particular, BIKE is mentioned as the most performant non-lattice scheme. I think it should be a very interesting side option. Now, let's also mention that code-based cryptography also has a very conservative approach, which is classic McAleese. So I think it's really, now that Psych is kind of gone, I think it's really the best family for exploring non-lattice constructions. We have both efficiency and conservative features.
Okay, thanks. Brian, you guys were, again, very much involved, a lot of input into the competition. I think you were involved with Frodo, Psych, Picnic, QTesla. Just your views on the none of them made the cut in the end of the day, but just your views on the competition and its outcome, and maybe your views on Psych and what just happened.
So a few things. So thanks. Yeah, this was the first time really that Microsoft had participated as part of industry and academic collaborations in a NIST competition or pseudo competition, since technically this is a standardization activity since it selects multiple winners. I think NIST did a fantastic job and continues to do so. And I fully support them getting future funding to continue to take their standards to ISO and things like that. And Dustin's heard me advocate for that before. I think they had a very hard job. This was the most diverse set of candidates they had received. And I remember when we sat here at Santa Barbara talking about, the competition for AES and the competition for SHA-3, and what was what we're trying to accomplish here was more difficult. We got involved in our submissions based on where our expertise was and our collaborations. And on Frodo, we took a very conservative approach. We wanted unstructured lattices. We knew we were going to pay a performance penalty on that, but we thought that was the most safe and secure route to go. We also knew there would be a lot of submissions on structured lattices, and it's going to be harder to distinguish yourself on that. We were the only isogeny-based scheme, and if you asked me 4 weeks ago, I would have told you that things looked really kind of good, and we really liked the small key size as an alternative to the choices that were made in the structured lattice schemes. But this is why we do cryptography, right? And this is why we gain confidence in algorithms by trying to break them. And I would remind everybody that it was 18 years ago in this room that Xiaoyang Wang got up and broke MD5 in front of all of us, right? And that set off a whole wave of work. And so, Microsoft put challenge money up behind Psych and behind Picnic because we wanted to encourage cryptanalysis work. And I think that 50,000 just paid off spectacularly, as far as I'm concerned. It was to get this kind of a new fundamental result is fantastic. It came at a time between rounds when if we could find a patch, we have the opportunity to possibly submit it. Won't say things are looking very good right now based on the more recent results that have come out, but I think the overall competition has gone very well. And we've seen a lot of public study of the candidates. And I think the results that come out of this, we're going to have good confidence in. So, I still think we're going to end up hybridizing things through the rest of the decade because we got to keep building up that confidence in all the new things. But overall, I think NIST has done a great job and they should be applauded for the work they've done so far.
We've been through the competition. Do you think we should just accept the outcome and take it from there, or would you welcome a round 4? Do you want to have another churn through this? Or?
Well, first off, there is going to be a round 4, obviously, and again, and I think technically Psych is still part of round 4. So I think that what we've seen is that at any point in time, we could get a new cryptanalytic result that breaks something we're dependent upon. So having a second chem is a good idea. I will take NIST to task on the following point on the signature side. I wish that they had actually picked one between dilithium and Falcon. And I say that, and I know that they give a preference to dilithium. My concern on this point, and I think folks understand this, is that Falcon's got better size and better performance characteristics if you've got the floating point support. And I am worried that when we get to the next stage of things outside of NIST and in the IETF and other places, we're going to see working groups diverge in terms of what they choose to follow. This is actually, if you read my communications with the ACM column from January, where I talk about waves, cascades, and long tails, right? Waves of outputs from NIST triggering cascades of standardization work and protocol standards in the IETF and elsewhere. And the long tail of small community protocols that are going to take a longer time to update. TLS is going to happen quick, right? IPsec, SMIME, LAMPS, those will happen more quickly. But the things that have multiple internal dependencies on other standards are going to take longer to update. And my worry is we're going to see some fracturing in the way in which individual protocol standards choose to hybridize, choose to do hybrid signatures, choose to hybrid chems, or even the choices between something as simple as what's the mandatory to implement and what's the nice to have between dilithium and Falcon. And I think we're going to end up implementing all those. And I just worry that we're not going to get as much convergence as we could get. So that would be my only constructive criticism. And NIST had its reasons for doing what it did, but that's the only drawback I could see of the round 3 outputs.
Right. And just to acknowledge Brian, there's a paper, The Long Road Ahead to Transition to Post-Quantum Cryptography in the CACM January this year, where you can find more details on all of that. Perhaps, Michael, to maybe get back to you. Do you welcome a round 4, or are you guys just going ahead with what we got and you don't want to look in the rear view mirror and or what?
No, I think it's really, really important. And don't forget that quantum is not the only technology on the horizon which can be a threat to crypto. There's things like neuromorphic computing, in-memory computing, AI-based attacks. the future is as more uncertain, I think, than it's ever been in terms of cool new technologies and the opportunity for them to be misused in breaking things. And that's all the more reason to have a steady stream of, you know, when you talk about agility, I think agility needs to go across the crypto life cycle. So in terms of standards, there needs to be a continuous pipeline of standards or algorithm development, and then the implementations and deployment. So I think continuous is a very important word, because it's a continuity of the work in the different areas, which is going to give you protection against this very uncertain future we're entering.
Okay, well, maybe it's time to talk about that uncertainty. I got a lovely quote from Paolo from the first session, where he said, "It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future," which I think that's a great quote, isn't it? Yeah. You can't but like that. No, but so one thing I'm aware of is that the three of the participants in the roundtable today work for companies who, as well as you know, developing post-quantum methods for cryptography, if you like, with the right hand, the left hand of their companies are actually actively developing quantum computers, right? So they should be in a good position. I mean, I presume you have conversations over the water cooler about with the other side of the house as to how's it going? Are you getting places? Are we any closer? So I'm going to ask you. I'm quite happy if you don't really want to respond in any detail, but I mean, I'll make a prediction. I'll stick my neck out first and see if there's anyone else want to stick theirs out. I would predict that we won't see a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. I won't see one in my lifetime, and I'm feeling pretty healthy. I reckon I'm going to be around for a while yet. So I'd just like to ask you, if you want, and you guys know an awful lot more because of the companies you work with. You know, your insights will be far superior to mine. I'm just working off my gut. You're actually working off much harder information than that. Just to go around the table and ask you, what do you think yourself? Edelyn.
I can stay silent on that matter, since I'm not working for a company that is actively developing quantum computers. I sleep calmly, and I am more worried about vulnerabilities at this stage against classical attacks. As I think it was Mike who said that there are still companies out there that haven't updated their classical algorithms.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Raphael?
Yes, I think actually this discussion is more about risk assessment. I think if there is a chance that such a quantum computer appear in the next 10 years, I think it's already enough for us to move the needle and really prioritize this. In terms of prediction, yeah, I'm not really in a position to talk about the quantum computing roadmap at Google, but I think everything what people are talking about is having a chance that this happens by 2030 or sometime maybe later. I think that's really enough for us to prioritize this, to put this as a top priority, I would say.
Okay. Brian, I think you've mentioned the year 2030 in a couple of places as being significant. Well, what do you think?
Okay, so I guess 2 points. The first one is I think one of the best resources on this is the survey that Michaela Mosca and the other folks at Evolution Q or the Risk, I forgot the exact name of your organization. But they put a survey out where they actually surveyed quantum physicists and folks actually building quantum computers to get estimates as to when do they think how far away it is. And you look at the graphs on that and what people think, and the percentages of folks who think there's a 50-50 chance within 15 years from today or so. So I would first point you to, I believe the 2021 is the most recent one, and to go pull that survey. When I started my project at MSR on this was in early 2015, before the NIST modification announcement which was in August of that year. I went to our quantum computing team and I said, when do you think we're going to see a cryptographically relevant? We didn't even know what that meant precisely. And they said 15 years. That was their finger in the air guess. Well, we're now 7 years past then, and they're still telling me 15 years. So, you know, you can kind of argue the 15 years kind of shifts. Look, there's some real hard problems here. We know that we probably are looking at needing 2,000 logical scalable quantum bits, right? Fault tolerant quantum bits. We'll be lucky if we get 1,000 to 1 physical to logical So you're looking at a couple million physical bits for scaling the systems. And the folks I talk to now say they're not even sure any of the physical systems that are being used to build qubits these days will be able to scale that much, and that we might have to develop a different mechanism to actually build a qubit before we're going to be able to build 2 million or more physical. That being said, it comes back to, as Raphael said, your risk assessment. If my concern is I'm protecting national security data that's got a 50-year or more security horizon, I got to worry about what the adversary's got in 50 years. And yeah, I do think within that envelope, we're going to see, cryptographic quantum computers before then. I don't think it's a never going to happen situation. 2030 might be optimistic now, looking at where things are, but it's going to take us. We'll be lucky if the US government gets all their systems migrated by 2035, as was the date that was just set in National Security Memo 10. I think we'll be lucky if we can get everything by then.
Right.
Okay.
Michael, do you want your 2 cents worth on?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. So one of them, I spoke to some very esteemed colleagues who were around in the area when CMOS was a very experimental technology to resist a system that didn't look unlike early quantum systems, and there was like 50% split in people saying that technology would never scale. And I think we're kind of seeing a bit of a repeat of this. So 10 years ago, 90% of the cryptographers in my team did not believe in this. It was kind of, in the sense it was, the such quantum machines are never going to be built, etc., etc., etc. Now, I think now it's the primary focus of what we do. And if I see, I'm not going to commit, let's say if I see the development, I was also a little bit skeptical, understand the risk aspect that that if something happens, then it's pretty catastrophic. But when I see the advancements in progress, I am not a skeptic anymore, put it this way. And I guess you may have seen some announcements this year, but I think I have been surprised at the progress, both on the efficiency of implementation of quantum algorithms, as well as the technologies which are coming out, how to scale these things. So I can only say that I am an awful lot less skeptical than I was just a few years ago.
Okay, interesting. I suppose, just briefly, my own take on it. I mean, Peter Shor's algorithm was from 1994, and I remember reading about that in Scientific American. And I remember some commentary at the time, everyone saying that's very interesting. But cryptographers, by and large, just went, yeah, and carried on business as usual for another 10 years. And really, nobody felt the need for a post-quantum competition. That nothing much happened. And then, well, my view on it was probably distorted, but the D-Wave, this Canadian company, came up with this technology, and suddenly quantum computing was getting hyped. And it was only much later that we realized that what D-Wave were doing isn't really relevant to our concerns. I mean, and in response to that mountain of hype that happened, we've now got spooked, and we've reacted. And I suppose I have a view that maybe we reacted too quickly. Is there a case for just kicking the can down the road by another decade? Maybe on the basis that quantum computers are 10 years further off than we thought they were. Therefore, we can put the adoption of post-quantum crypto back 10 years, and in 10 years' time, we'll be in a much better position to make, or in other words, are we sort of panicking here? Anyone care to comment on that, or am I just talking nonsense? Which is a possibility.
I'll take a shot at that. I don't think we're panicking. And I think that when you look at how long it is taking to run the competition, and which we knew which was, I mean, this is the timeline that NIST set when they announced it. And then you look at how long it takes commercial systems to migrate. You have to start early because it's going to take you 15 years, right? Again, TLS and things like that will probably update and will get deployed pretty quickly. But when you look at the deployments of elliptic curve cryptography, there are still lots of the broad, software ecosystem that have no ECC support. or it's still just coming along. And you can trace the movement of industry to ECC really back to 2005 when NIST announced Suite B and that you had to start shipping. I remember when they announced it, and we had a crash program because we were in the middle of developing Windows Vista, and we had to get ECC into Vista if we wanted it to be purchased by the US government, which is Microsoft's single largest customer. And that necessitated, we had a cryptographically agile API, but it turned out it was cryptographically agile for RSA and DSA and Diffie-Hellman. And it wasn't as agile as we needed it to be for ECC, and that led to a whole new API deployment. That takes time, and we're still trying to get ECC out in parts and places. So if I take that timeline and then I say, okay, now think about that for PQ, it's going to be even longer. So I think we're being prudent. And I think we're being prudent because we got to build up confidence in all of these new algorithms as we deploy them and study them.
Right. Which brings us nicely onto the whole issue of migration, right? The standards now in place, migration policies. I know you guys have all been thinking about this, and your employers have been thinking about this and put a lot of planning into it. So I suppose maybe I start again with you, Brian. I think I saw a talk where you the slide up there in 2020, and you were talking about starting migration early in 2022, according to the chart. I mean, which would suggest that you've started.
So first off, that was my predicted timeline from 2015, which I showed to the execs at Microsoft in 2018 to try to get them to start moving early. I would say I was only partially successful in trying to build up some executive support. There's a lot of knowledge, but when there's a real problem in trying to get developers to spend limited development cycles on cryptographic agility, which is seen as a security tax, and on migration, when they have to trade that off against new features that they think are going to generate sales. I think what's happening right now is that we have done trials, and you've seen some of this in the Open Quantum Safe project at Waterloo, where we've looked at, integrating into TLS and OpenSSH and OpenVPN. We did our big trial that we talked about afterwards, where we ran a PQ encrypted network tunnel to our underwater data center off the north coast of Scotland to test viability of algorithms. And that was really a test case for talking about how we would deploy for something like Azure data center connections around the world. The thing we have to be careful about, especially when you're talking about something like Windows, is we don't want to support and deploy something before the standard's out and then have to end up supporting a non-standard thing at the end of the day. So that's why you see us participating in the IETF on standardization activities and things like that. But a lot of the deployment in the products and services is going to depend upon the protocol standards following suit. So, there will be interop testing. There was mention earlier of the NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, NCCOE project on PQC migration. We are partners with NIST in that, along with many other folks. And that's a place where that project's going to develop tools to help companies with migration, to do inventories, and do probably some test bedding as well. And so I think that's a good next resource. But I think the entire migration is not happening as fast as I would necessarily like, but some of that is just dependent upon standardization time and protocol standardization time.
Right. I mean, it's understandable. We've only just got the standards, and
Right.
I understand you guys have been doing all the testing in
That's
advance of that. But now the starting gun is fired.
Oh,
and you
yeah.
guys are off and running.
Yeah. So at this point, right, while again, up until 4 weeks ago, we were also going to be, we were still pursuing the research stuff on site. But as far as the product teams go, they are now aware of what needs to get done, and they are actively seeing this come up in various IETF working groups. And you're going to see that work continue, and then it's going to migrate into the products. This choice about signatures to support, I think, is something that a bunch of our product teams, and one of the things I'm concerned about is the chair of our internal cryptography review board, is making sure that all of Microsoft speaks with one voice, and that as our product teams are out in various standards activities, that we're not supporting different applications, like different hybridization methods between two different groups, and that we unify, and that we get the industry to unify as much around sort of standard ways of doing the things that are adjacent to the NIST standards, but not part of the NIST standards proper.
Right. Okay, well, maybe Raphael or Google off and running. I know, again, you've done a lot of experimentation with,
Yes.
you've been playing around with TLS and putting post-quantum stuff in there and seeing how it worked out. But is Google now charging down the migration pipeline?
Yes, definitely is a top priority for us. In the past, we published some experiments with Chrome. Our colleague Adam Langley worked with some colleagues from Cloudflare. They had very interesting results about the feasibility of deploying PQC in TLS. Now, what is happening more recently is we are trying to identify what are the top priority projects within Google that require an earlier transition. So here there are things like, for example, things that depend on hardware, for example, where public keys are baked into hardware. So you have a very long lifespan for the product. You need to accommodate all the time for finalizing the standardization process, then integrating this into hardware and knowing that this will be in the field for a long time. Other things like, for example, encryption in transit is also a very interesting use case for early PQC adoption because it's something that you can just switch the algorithm at any point. So we don't really need to have the final specs from this. So that's something we can start exploring. There's a bunch of things that we're starting to work, but I think as of now, how I can describe this is about prioritization. We are trying to find what are the most important nodes in our network and infrastructure.
Right, but your view would be the competition's over. That book is closed. Time to move on.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes, we are trying to make everything prepared for this final announcement.
Right. Edlin, with your involvement with Cryptomatic, are Cryptomatic ready to ship products with the new standard?
Well, the standard isn't out there yet. We are ready to ship the crypto agility, and we are ready to help people becoming crypto agile. And to stay within your analysis with the asteroid, the best way to protect against or a good way to protect against the asteroid, and you're not knowing when it's hitting, is to build a good shelter, and that will also protect against tornadoes. And then you can think about how you equip your shelter later on once the latest technology is out that can help you. And so with some things we can readily deploy post-quantum cryptography, given that there are some HSM providers who already offer post-quantum cryptography as part of the implementations. And with others, all what we can help is becoming crypto agile so that you can make the switch whenever the algorithms are available and standardized. If you're thinking, for instance, for the European Union's qualified electronic signatures that can only be deployed once we have the correspondingly certified HSMs. So all what we can work on here is to become ready for that switch whenever it becomes a reality to do so. So I view migration as a two-step process. First, get ready to be crypto agile, and then make the switch whenever we are ready to do so, when the actual standards are out and when we can tie all the loose knots.
Right. Michael, I get the sense that you guys are out of the blocks already on this. So you're a good guy to ask the follow-up question, which is hybridization. Do we go hybrid or do we not? I mean, to me, it seems like an absolute no-brainer that we need to start off with hybrid products, but it's not obvious to other people, and other people that I respect disagree. So what are you guys doing?
It depends. So obviously making the algorithms available so that people who program against those on our platform, so it's a platform specific thing that we make the algorithms available for people to use however they want. We also announced on the larger platforms that they boot into a quantum safe state. So there we have used hybrid, and the reason for using hybrid is purely because the standards are not there yet, the trust is not there yet. So there is I would say that there are arguments for hybrid. I would comment, I have a couple of comments to hybrid though. Let's say as Lucas said in the previous talk, that there are ways to get hybrid wrong, and generally what we see is that there are far more problems with crypto implementations than there are with the underlying algorithms, so to speak. And the killer for security is complexity. So I think hybrid needs to be done very carefully. If I remember back to the EC transition times, then you could tunnel, for example. So you wouldn't sort of try and create a protocol where the hybrid aspect was somehow baked into the protocol, but you would use layers to achieve a hybrid effect. So I would caution against complexity, because this is where things always go wrong. Nevertheless, certainly up until the period where when NIST has provided the assurance schemes and the certification processes, I think it will be a necessity. My worry is that, and I think it was Brian that mentioned it, at standards organizations, there is a bit of there are many standards organizations that need to justify what they do, and unfortunately there's not enough of the skills in some of these techniques to go around. And I worry that lots of people then go off in lots of different directions in the very same way. And so I almost think that industry would be well served to have like a meta, not meta standard, but maybe this is something that NCCOE could do or whatever, but a set of suggestions for standards organizations about how to coordinate and to raise awareness of all the challenges we've had with things like ECDSA and things like this, deterministic, non-deterministic. There are many, many opportunities for things to diverge. And as a systems provider, we have to sort of make our systems, let's say, support things which are out there. So some it would be very valuable for industry to have some form of guidance for standards organizations about how to maybe look forward and prevent the sort of thing which has happened in the past, which has made everybody's lives difficult.
Right. So I mean, that's a problem with hybridization, isn't it? I mean, we talk about things getting messy. Hybridization seems to take us in a potentially messy direction. I suppose, to my mind, hybrid crypto is a bit like two-factor authentication, isn't it? It's a case of to be sure, as we say in Ireland. And we're going for an extra backup. Edlin, hybridization, yes or no, for or against?
Yes.
Good. That's a nice answer. Thank you. Raphael?
Yes, I would say absolutely needed, at least for these coming years. I think it would be very risky to have a full transition to any of the PQC algorithms, maybe except for hash-based signatures. I think hash-based signatures is a construction that we know for so long. Since basically the inception of public key cryptography, we know about Merkle signature, but we also know that hash-based signatures are not suitable for most applications or many applications, either because of performance or state management requirements. But overall, I would say that hybrid should be the preferred deployment strategy in the coming years.
Yeah. Well, do you agree? Like, let's take TLS as an example. Let's take the key exchange in TLS, and let's say we want to go hybrid with that. I mean, the fact that we've got two schemes involved now, presumably, is a big multiplier in terms of messiness. Like, what do we combine with what? Is it Kyber 768 with X25519, or is it another elliptic curve with a different security level on Kyber? I mean, the number of combinations, if you like, kind of could potentially blow up. And in the absence of standards, like, what are we to do?
Yeah, and actually just touched a very important question on how to deploy hybrid in practice. Like, for example, with all these possibilities, should we consider each algorithm independently, or should we consider the conjunction of both as a new algorithm, which I think is probably a very good approach. So I think there will be lots of questions to be answered. Although hybrid looks like a simple strategy, I would say that even CAMs are probably the easiest ones. Digital signatures become very, very messy because you have so many options. You could either, for example, sign your message using algorithm 1 and then sign the message using algorithm 2, or you can sign using algorithm 1 and then sign the signature of algorithm 1 using algorithm 2, and so on and so on. So I think there will be a significant increase in complexity, but I think it's worth the cost. I think it's really the way to go, given how much is at stake.
Brian, I know you have got views on the hybrid issue,
Yeah.
so and maybe just to give you a direction, there's the whole PKI thing, there's certificates. I mean, do we sign everything twice? I mean, what the impact of all that and how long will it take for that to percolate through the system? The floor is yours.
Okay, so I do believe that we'll be deploying hybrid modes for probably at least the end of this decade, would be my rough guess right now. That actually aligns with the ANSSI comments from their December document on what they predicted. And our National Academies report that's due out in the next month or so basically says the same thing. So look for that when it's out. In the PKI space, we have done prototypes where we did concatenated signatures. So we signed a cert where we generated signature 1 with algorithm 1, signature 2 with algorithm 2, concatenated together, new OID, and did that in an HSM and did interop with OpenSSL and OpenSSH, you know, as part of the open quantum safe space. And that works. And, you know, the software stack support it, but there you are defining a new signature algorithm at times. There are some drawbacks to doing hybrid, which is you're adding the size of the signatures and, you know, you're adding a number of bytes to it. And when you're talking about signing every DLL in Windows and downloading that as part of Windows Update and things like that, there's bandwidth costs and there's size costs to it. But that would seem to be the prudent, safe space, safe thing to do right now, especially if you're doing anything for long-term security, where you want to give yourself an opportunity after the first algorithm breaks to go back and re-sign everything with, say, a third signature algorithm and double sign. So I'm not so worried about the PKI space. I think that for online protocols where there is a, like in TLS, where the client advertises what they know and what they're able to take, and a server can select among a number of identity certificates for presentation, that's okay. In an offline mode where you have to guess at what the other endpoint's gonna know and be able to validate, that's a harder thing. Haven't yet seen a super strong case for some sort of backward compatible certificate. There's been a lot of talk about that. Sign with one in a classical algorithm, embed a PQ signature in an extension or something like that. I would need to see a use case that actually needed that. Okay, but I think that's definitely coming. I will say this, there are some customers who have told us that they're not interested, that they would prefer not hybrid modes. They'd rather like wrap 2 separate instances. They'd rather do a classical and then a quantum around it. And they think that that is easier to analyze. And I kind of understand those arguments, but I don't think that's what you're going to see, predominantly on the internet.
Thanks, Brian. Francisco's telling me we have a couple of questions from the audience.
The first question comes from Mike Vermeer. He's asking, we are all doing risk assessment based on just a few known algorithms like Shorts and Grover. We are doing calculations on quantum hardware requirements needed to run this and basing risk assessment on that. As we get more people who work with more developed quantum computing systems, do you think that new algorithms could be created in the next few years that will create dramatically different risk scenarios?
Okay, I think the
New quantum algorithms are coming?
right. I think the paraphrase is if we have Shor's algorithm, we have Grover's algorithm, there could be more quantum algorithms that could do yet more damage. What do you guys think?
Certainly could be. I mean, as part of every submission to the NIST competition, you had to do both a classical and a quantum analysis. And it's clear that we still have debates among the community about how to actually measure some of those quantum algorithms, not only in terms of number of qubits, but circuit depth and things like that. It's certainly possible that we'll see, new quantum algorithms as that field grows, that could provide better attacks than the ones that we know today. I don't think that would be any different than the situation we're in with classical cryptography right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should I move to
Another question?
Yes, we got another question from Twitter. In practice, we sometimes need to go beyond plain CAMs and vanilla signatures. would that be at odds with agility, or is agility actually required when supporting advanced protocols? I don't know who wants to.
I'm not quite sure I understood.
Um,
Let's read it again.
if you are trying to deploy, the way that I understand the question, if you are trying to deploy advanced protocols, then is when you need more agility, or is agility at odds with advanced protocols?
Right, by advanced protocols, I think the questioner implies something more than chems and signatures.
Mhm.
It means the other stuff.
Maybe talking about like thresholds or doing multi-party computation or something like that.
That kind of thing, yeah.
Which certainly you would have agility needs for as well, and you would want to be able to select different algorithms based on what you're doing. I could see, sure.
Yeah.
That would be my answer, my quick answer.
Yes, well, I'd observe on that if you wanted to, those advanced algorithms, I mean, am I wrong to say that lattices are the only show in town? Am I could be wrong.
Maybe I think there are some advanced schemes that need different properties. So, things like zero knowledge proofs and certain homomorphic things, very comfortable in the lattice domain. But I think there are other advanced constructs which have yet to be looked at. So I think this is going to be one of the interesting aspects, what it takes now to make all of the things created with basic building blocks and to understand the practicality, the quantum safety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's been hard enough for a lot of advanced schemes to actually get them rolled out due to complexity. So I think the answer with agility is, depends on your definition of agility, but I think without agility, these advanced protocols anyway have a problem being used. And so I think it just becomes part of the equation. Just gets a little bit more difficult just because these new basic building blocks are very different than the ones we're used to and that we're used to building advanced schemes with.
Can I just use this question to actually highlight an upcoming problem, which is basically the lack of efficient constructions to many sophisticated crypto protocols? Because as we know, the NIST PQC competition covers what's really the main ingredients: CAN, digital signature, symmetric encryption. But we do have many applications in the industry which require, for example, group signatures, ring signatures, oblivious transfer, OPRF, and many other constructions that I'm not quite sure there is enough, or maybe we should promote more the research in these areas, because it would be a really big problem for the industry to turn off some features or systems because we don't have practical replacement in the PQC world.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point. Francisco?
We got one more question. Is addressed to Mike Osborne, and is again from Mike Vermeer. So he is asking, Mike Osborne mentioned other emerging computing technologies that could be a threat to crypto, like neuromorphic computing. Could you give more details or more examples of these other emerging computing technologies that could be over the horizon?
I mean, if you look at in-memory computation, so a lot of the modeling of some of the security properties make assumption on on memory access, things like this. So if you now actually bring computation into memory, things change in terms of those calculations. If you look at neuromorphic computing, this is an area I'm not an expert on, but it's an area that's very driven, certainly in Europe. This is essentially modeling architectures that model, how the brain works in terms of connectivity. Can't remember the other thing that I said, but the other interesting area, of course, on the assumption that that quantum computers will scale, there's a tremendous amount of work in advancing AI, on quantum AI, I would call it. And so we're starting to see a lot of very interesting research directions on using AI per se to attack crypto. So just a handful of examples of new technologies which mean we have to keep looking, we have to keep our eyes open, we have to keep researching and keep this pipeline of research going, such that we always have something there kind of like ready for whatever new technology comes along.
Any more questions there, Francisco?
Yeah, one more.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. Just a second.
And of course, we welcome questions from the floor here, if you want
someone
to talk to the microphone.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Need to turn on the mic. Yeah.
Now it's fine. Okay, yeah. So I have heard in the previous session and this session that there are multiple industries which are still using DES. So now let's say you are deploying some PQC algorithm and after 20 years someone comes up with an attack. So how easy or difficult would be for you to, like at that time, replace it with some other algorithm or migrate it to something else?
What did you say? It was used DES? I'm not sure.
So I mean, so there are some industries which are still using DES and they could not migrate it to like the new one. So let's say you are deploying one PQC algorithm right now, after the competition is over, and after 20 or 25 years, someone came up with an attack. Then how easy or difficult would it be? It would be to like migrate it to something else.
If I understood your question, I think this is all about crypto agility.
Yeah.
I think we need to have systems that we can quickly switch crypto algorithms. I think this could solve quite significantly this problem. So yeah, I would say that crypto agility is probably the main ingredient. We need to create systems since they are designed with the idea that we may need to replace the crypto algorithms, hopefully with not so much of urgency, but I think the systems need to be designed with that in mind.
So I expect it would not be similar to DES, right?
Sorry?
So it would not be the same case like DES.
AES,
DES.
DS. Yes, I mean, like we need to react quickly. For sure, we learned this lesson. Like we know that even there are some applications still based on MD5, SHA-1. I'm not speaking about Google, I'm speaking in general. And this shows like how much time we need for the transition, mostly due to the problems with the systems. They are not crypto agile. So I think by having systems that are crypto agile, this would help us quite a lot.
Okay.
Fine.
Thank you.
Let me make one comment, because I think part of what you're highlighting is the fact that there are certain systems in certain industries where even though we've known DES as a week for a long time, they have still not moved off of it. I often hear this from certain financial institutions that are still using DES and backend, within their closed networks, and that's what's in the hardware and they can't kind of update from it. So that's certainly a concern. And I have had other financial institutions who have said to me, hey, we just moved to Windows 7, aren't we great? So, it takes time, okay? And this is true in particular for critical infrastructure systems, where you may only have an opportunity to update the cryptography every 15 to 20 years when you replace hardware. And if you miss that window, you're using what you're using. Now, one of the potential solutions for that is to actually add layers of post-quantum protection as a wrapper around the initial protocol. You could do this with effectively doing VPN endpoints in between a channel that's still, say, using DES and can't update. And so we may see a lot of use in some of these systems where you cannot change the underlying implementations, but you add a wrapping layer that's independent to kind of add on the PQ protection. Okay, so I think that's another way to, but certainly we all hope that when the PQ algorithms are as old as DES are, that we'll all have a lot of agility in the system. We just change a configuration somewhere and everything magically moves to a new algorithm. I'd love to live to see that day.
Thank you.
Maybe just a quick point, because I think it's a point which make actually migrating difficult, and that there's a lot of use of things like DES and SHA and MD5, which are not a quantum problem at all. Because at the moment we're only worried about passive attacks where things can be harvested or collected and somehow attacked offline. We are not now worried about active attacks where your adversary is an online quantum computer. So actually figuring out of all of the instances where we have used classical crypto, which are the ones which are critical. This is a bit a challenge the industry has right now, because it's not all critical. MD5 used for lookups or for other things is not a problem. So it's kind of having the right strategy to really be sure, very clear about the sort of quantum threat you're addressing, and then to identify those instances that an attacker can get the artifacts they need to run the attack and the data they need to run the attack, actually means it's kind of, it's really not a problem to carry on using some of the crypto that we have today. I mean, that's going to sound funny, because I think in the end it's better that we all move to new cryptography, because the next time we do a crypto migration, then we're going to have 4 generations of crypto that we have to figure out, why is that still there? Is it okay in that context to use, etc., etc. So I really hope that the quantum threat gives us the excuse to actually think about doing cryptography properly and clearing up a bit the mess that we have now.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I think we're basically out of time. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, sorry, didn't see you there. Okay.
All right.
Question from the floor. Yeah, then we close. Yeah.
Thanks for this discussion. It's really important. But at the same time, it feels like we're still in the science project stage, right? Everybody's doing things, and we have little pieces of interoperability, and then we're waiting for NIST to finalize at least the round 3 algorithms before we can say, okay, we can like put it into the standards and have end-to-end interoperability. To do anything at this point in commercial industry is so difficult, because you have to rely on 3 or 4 different software stacks, HSM vendors, and CA providers integrating, and we don't even have like settled on hybrid. We're talking about a lot of different mechanisms, and they all can work really well, but I mean, trying to pick one through this morass when we don't even have anything final yet. So my question is, what do we do in the meantime? Like, what can we do now to prepare for standardizations, and what are good things for development teams to focus on to get ready? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, we're in a difficult position. We're on the cusp of change, and managing that cusp is going to be hard, guys.
You can just mention what I already said in the beginning was about the crypto inventory, which is finding where you're using classical cryptography. It's a very tricky task in large organizations, and this can be done right away. I hope that most large organizations are already working on that. Now, another thing is there are some situations, some use case where you don't necessarily need to follow a standard, because, for example, if you have in transit encryption where you control both ends, you can just add a PQC layer now, even though it's not the final algorithm. And eventually, when the final CAM is published, you can easily switch without major problems. So there are a few things we can do right now, even though we don't have the standards.
Yeah.
And let me just add to Raphael's point. When you do that, when you use an enterprise or doing an inventory of what cryptography you use, an important point on that, and the NCCOE project description talks about some of this as well. So I would also refer you to that. It's important to know who actually owns the implementation of that cryptography that you depend upon, and what are their migration plans. And then the other thing so those are all fair questions asked. And the other thing I tell customers who come into Microsoft is, if you are writing a request for proposals right now, if you're putting out a bid, if you're architecting something now, it is a fair question to your vendors to say, what are your PQC migration plans? And anything that gets bid on, or at least, where you're getting a proposal for something, there better be a PQC transition part of that, right? Or it's spec'd as you've got to have the PQC algorithms along the way, right? We don't want to we need to stop digging the hole deeper, right? And so we shouldn't be procuring new systems today that don't have a migration or a transition plan as part of them. And we shouldn't be designing new systems and shipping new APIs that don't have sufficient agility built in.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. I think we'll have to wrap it up there. Again, I'd like to thank my panelists. It'd be great to get you all back in 2030 and see how all this pans out, because the future does look unpredictable, as Paolo said. So that's it. Thank you all, and we bring this session to a close.
Thank you very much. We will
you.
have our lunch break now. And see you for the third roundtable afterwards. Thank you, Adeline. Thank you, Mike. Bye.
Thank you.